Go. All right, we're live, even though we're a few minutes late.
Sorry about that. Welcome back, everyone, to Fantifa.
Yeah,
Um,
hopefully we don't have technical issues like we did last time.
yeah, that got pretty janky. So hopefully this time we don't get our communications cut off mysteriously. So
By the Zionists, which is
yeah,
kind of kind of a coincidence, don't you? Wouldn't you say?
well, yeah. Considering what's been going on, not only in the world but on even on YouTube, like small channels like mine, I re-uploaded a video from Jason Unruh that was talking about Israeli violence and what exactly has been going on there, and I got removed for misinformation. Funnily enough, they don't tell you actually what about it was misinformation. They just say, "Oh, it's misinformation." So, and that confirms my theory because my channel's so small that it's not people reporting it; it's YouTube screening every little thing that people post that's related to Israel.
Well, they know a government that's basically lost would not be doing this. It's in desperation at this point. Israel has lost. They don't they don't have support really except by a small percentage of the population worldwide. Only like the bougie of the bourgeoisie are the ones that support Israel at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to damage control as much as possible to try to salvage what they can from what is obviously a televised genocide. You can't deny that it isn't a genocide. I mean, the West, their media itself isn't denying that it's a genocide.
Did you hear about what happened in the UN meeting?
No.
So the general secretary or whatever of the UN was like, he's like, Palestine's actions were not unprovoked. They've been living under like oppression for 58 years. And then the guy from Israel like flipped out and he was like shouting. He's like, no, that's not true. We asked you to resign and stuff. The general secretary needs to resign for being anti-Israel or something. It's like these are the actions of someone who's desperate.
Yeah, they are. Israel would not be doing this if they were if they were in a good position. They're not in a good position, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The whole majority of the world's population wants nothing to do with Israel, and they're even being more aggressive towards anti-BDS laws. Like,
Yeah,
don't you love it how capitalism basically, oh, we're for the free market, except when we don't want to support a certain country.
yeah. Free market. It's the idea of a free market. It's actually not like you can't have a free market. It's always there has to be a little bit of control to actually function. But yeah, no, your point is right. Yeah. Anyways, that's not
Yeah.
our main subject for today, but it is important to bring up considering the ongoing events. But
Yes. Well, entertainment does distort people's reality on how they view the world. I mean, the way
mhm,
you could argue the way news is presented is more like entertainment rather than news.
it is, especially like in the internet age and everything is fast. People don't want to take time to read a long article or something. So it's just like a short little video or little blurbs about stuff and it's
Well, there's nothing
consumed.
wrong with watching a video if it's a decently long.
Well,
It's
yeah,
kind of like
I know. I'm just thinking like mainstream news like outlets and stuff.
it's like you
And
have this fucking thing almost every day. It seems like Russia is going to surrender any day now. Russia's going to,
yeah.
or Ukraine is about to collapse. It's like we've been hearing about this shit for over a year now. It seems like they're presenting this like it's some sort of fucking like sport or something.
Yeah, which is pretty sick when there's people's lives involved, but that's how they sell it, right? People are invested in this kind of like it's a story, and people who live so far away from stuff like um, Ukraine or Palestine are they don't like identify with it in the same way they identify with it like a story.
Yeah, it's just so stupid, and not to mention like entertainment also just kind of fucks with people's perception of like what a genocide, whether what people even questioning is was this justified? It's like what the fuck. Okay, stop. Let's stop right there. There was no I don't care what anybody says genocide's never justifiable.
No, not at all. And let's say Israel was a legitimate state that wasn't founded upon colonialism. If they were attacked, the actions that they're still doing are far beyond defense. Like, considering what just happened, like bombing like the strip and blowing up hospitals, and they told people to retreat to the south, and then they were even killing civilians as they were retreating. Like, it's far beyond defense or justified. Yeah.
They're not even they're targeting everyone that's in Gaza, even non-Palestinians are being targeted.
Yep.
But this also goes to the point where, okay, you want to know a conversation you should never have in the Naruto fandom without going insane?
Oh God, what?
Debating about the Uchiha clan massacre.
Oh God.
Oh, it was completely justified. Itachi saved Konoha from going into a war, which is like, we don't fucking actually know that. That even if that was true, he didn't have to kill everybody, including the children.
I still think it was more for selfish reasons that he said himself. He's like, I did it to test my power. Like,
actually, that was before that's actually not true. That's a wreck. They retcon it. They retcon him into a hero. It's like, what?
I think that's stupid though. Like,
I personally would not have minded Itachi being self-righteous, but the very fact that you have fans justifying a genocide
based off of yeah.
I bring this up because if you could justify a genocide in a work of fiction, you could do it in the real world as well.
It's much easier to do in real life. Exactly.
If you do it in works of fiction, it's like, oh, but these people were, these people, they were actually defending themselves. It's like, yeah, I will take parallels between the Uchiha clan and the Palestinians, because both of them were not in strong positions of power.
Mm-hmm. Well, Uchiha clan, they were part of like the village police or whatever, weren't they?
Yeah, but let's be real with you. Your average Uchiha in Naruto would not be able to, like, can they take on all of Konoha? Would they be able to take on like the Atamurami clan, even the Hyuga clan, which we don't even know if the average Uchiha is even able to use Susanoo, or even is able to use the Miyako Sharingan.
Well, we saw that a lot of them, like Sasuke's aunt and uncle, and then a bunch of other people, they were just like shopkeepers and workers. They weren't even ninjas. Like,
that's just what makes it ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that goes to show you. Of course, this is that one of the many examples of the Naruto series where the author just wrote shit on the spot and didn't think about it.
Yeah, the implications.
The original Itachi, the version where Itachi just killed them for the hell of it, was better than just justifying a literal genocide.
I think that ties into what we're talking about too. Like, in real life, stuff isn't being created in a grand narrative. There is no, at least in my opinion, there's no like power dictating what happens. It's chaos. It is what it is, and people look at fiction and they try to see like narratives in it when it's totally false. Real life doesn't have these authorized narratives.
Oh, then don't get me started on Empire simps in the Star Wars fandom.
I was gonna say that's another thing. Yeah.
It's like, let's see, the Empire wiped out an entire culture and people in an instant with the Death Star. Not to
mention the Wookiees enslavement and
of course, if we're going by EU lore, there was a species that were refugees that lost their own homeworld, and a good chunk of what left of their species was on Alderaan.
And then that got blown up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an entire culture, entire people gone in an instant. And people kill it. Oh, but the Empire did nothing wrong because like the people in Alderaan were harboring terrorists. Was everyone a terrorist in Alderaan?
That sounds really familiar. Hey.
It's like we're billions of people on Alderaan rebel sympathizers. I highly doubt that.
Yeah.
It's just, and then you could go into the other things that the Empire did. It's just like the enslavement of alien species, the treatment of non-humans.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going by EU lore, the way women are treated in the Empire.
That's part of the revision in canon that I don't like, because like they made it like, oh, there's girl bosses in the Empire. I'm like, no, that's stupid.
It's very. You know what's really ridiculous about Star Wars canon? There was more diversity
What?
on the fascist side than the good guy side.
Yeah, at least in the new stuff. Yeah.
It's like, wait, what?
And at least, I mean, we don't see the internal mechanisms of like stuff in like the New Order or the New Canon Empire, but from what it is, they seem to not treat people with like the same kind of disrespect that like Ray and like that purple-haired captain treat people with. Like,
I guess it's totally pink washing,
yeah,
which basically distorts reality. Like, oh, you could, you could be you could be in the military too, and murder a bunch of people.
yeah, yeah,
I'm so,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I just had to put that. Oh yeah, and don't get me started on one of the biggest fascist and anime fandoms, Gundam.
See, I've never got into that series, but can you explain a little bit?
The Principality of Zeon. All okay. It would take a long time to explain what they are, but because I've been a Gundam fan for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they do have revolutionary roots, but it was co-opted by fascists.
Hmm.
Like, okay, in the Universal Century, the original timeline of Gundam, the people in space were tired of being governed by the people on Earth. They wanted independence.
Okay.
Now sounds like a bad thing so far, but then what makes Zeon Simps so disgusting, as bad as Empire Simps in Star Wars? The Principality of Zeon killed half of the Earth's population in a few hours at the start of
Oh
the
wow.
1-year war.
Hmm.
Yet they did nothing wrong, according to Zeon Simps.
Hmm. See,
Forget
the more like cool bad guys are made to look in fiction, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but like the more they're like kind of fetishize that fascistic element, the more people are like able to sympathize with that stuff in real life. They put their blinders on and they just think of it, oh, it's like fiction.
Well, I think the Japanese audience in Japan see themselves in Zeon. That's why
Hmm.
Zeon is far more popular in Japan in terms of merch, and why a lot of the side stories and there have Zeon portrayed in a more sympathetic light.
Hmm. Well,
Because,
considering the history of Japan, that's not very surprising. But
well, think about this. In with fascists, the Lost Cause myth is very popular.
yeah, that's true.
Like, oh, these were this was a glorious cause. They were portrayed, or that they that's basically what the narrative tends to be when it comes to these lost cause myth. Of course, you can apply this to anything from the people of from those who still are nostalgic for the South Vietnam. Many of them never actually lived in South Vietnam, or
Yeah,
the Confederacy, despite the fact
yeah.
nobody alive today has ever lived in the Confederacy or even knows someone that did.
It's even stupider when it's like people from the north or people from fucking Canada waving Confederate flags. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, it's fucking dumb.
Yeah.
It really is freaking stupid. And I think that's these fascists. They they insert themselves into the Empire, into Zeon, because of
Mm-hmm.
the Lost Cause myth. Though I don't think Zeon embodies it as much as Zeon does in Gundam.
Hmm. I mean that's the thing about fascist and just right wing ideology in general. There's a love of myth, right? Because they don't do a materialist analysis like a scientific analysis. And I'm not talking about like traditional cultures. I'm talking about myth as in like kind of like ideas of what the past was and what we have to return to. Do you know what I mean? Like you see
Yeah,
this kind of stuff from the Nazis, and even you see it now from like people like Jordan Peterson or Donald Trump. It's like mythologizing the past and kind of putting it in some kind of grand narrative when that reality never really existed.
that is very true. That is extremely true.
Mm-hmm.
And you could argue, why does Lord of the Rings have a fascist appeal? And I hate to say this as a fan, but it's because when you look at what do fascists see when they see like the people of the West in Lord of the Rings? What did they actually see? And
Yeah,
compare that to like Sauron and Saruman. What did they by comparison? What did they see?
yeah. The
I will
other versus
what?
the other versus the kind of hordes from the east kind of
Yes,
idea. Yeah,
like the white civilization protecting itself from the hordes of whatever kind of fucking shit they want to like inject into it. Now, I
yeah.
don't think Lord of the Rings is fascist. I'm not saying it is, but it cannot be denied that there is themes in Lord of the Rings that do appeal to fascists.
There's certain weird undertones to it that, I mean, it was written in a different time, and I don't think Tolkien himself was a fascist, but there's just some weird elements, like certain races are coded as certain like groups in real life, like yeah, and even like the men from like the south and like the men from the east, they're like portrayed as savages, even compared to like Rohan and Gondor and stuff. Like yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it is. Now, I don't think he was a fascist. Yeah, he did supported Franco, which is
I did
probably
not know that.
he
That's kind of
did.
fucked.
Yeah, his politics were a mixed bag. J.R.R. Tolkien. He hated the Nazis, yet he supported a fascist like Franco.
Hmm.
So I'm just saying his politics were a mixed bag, to
He was
say the
also
least.
somewhat a simp for the British Empire, but I think that comes down to him being in World War I, which is kind of a tough reality, right? Once you live through something like that, but at the same time, it's not really excusable.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
Now, I think I'm not going to deny that J.R. Tolkien is probably one of the greatest writers in all of literature. I'm not going to deny that. But the facts are the facts when you look at his work. But I'm not talking about mostly the movies here because most people have not read the books these days, unfortunately.
that's too
But
bad.
I bring up the movies primarily because as an easier frame of reference for those who don't read books,
Hmm.
and you could easily see the appeal of like of Lord of the Rings with fascists.
Yeah, yeah,
The the thing is, I don't see nearly the appeal for Witcher for fascists or Wheel of Time with fascists as Lord of the Rings, which
are there fascist fan elements in those series
I
too,
don't
or?
know. I don't
Mm.
look into that. But what I've read from Witcher, like it's not like I actually view it as better than Lord of the Rings in my opinion from the books.
Hmm.
I'm talking about. I think it's better than Lord of the Rings. A lot of the problematic aspects of Lord of the Rings is not in Witcher.
Hmm.
Like the elves are actually oppressed in Witcher. Same thing with dwarves. And it's not
Hmm.
portrayed as a good thing. Like humans are basically portrayed as fucked up like people. Like monarchies are not like unlike Lord of the Rings where it's basically romanticized. You know,
Yeah, they try to justify the idea of a monarchy in Lord of the Rings a lot of the time. Yeah.
well, Witcher it's basically tells you how it actually what it actually is. In fact, you're seeing more and more now that these kind of things are actually portrayed in a more realistic way rather than a more idealized way.
I guess that's refreshing though. Yeah.
I have no problem with if in a work of fiction if you're trying to portray like if you want to write a good king or a good whatever you want to call them, you want to make him a good person. But then again, that
Yeah.
only works in fiction. Doesn't in the real world it falls flat on its face. I mean,
And especially in like it works in a fantasy concept that's supposed to be taking place in like an alternate medieval setting basically. If you're taking something that's supposed to be in like futuristic or like modern setting, even in fantasy, like once you introduce monarchs as being good, it's like yeah, once people have discovered an alternative, it's no longer something that should be romanticized in those worlds, I mean.
well, I think a good criticism of this is like this is still relevant to the topic of like regarding the like how it distorts reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's just say someone like Aragorn would not be able to get very far in a realistic like fantasy setting that portrays like nobles and monarchs as they actually were. Like,
Yeah.
case point, for those of you who read A Song of Ice and Fire, Ned Stark. Ned Stark, I guess you could say he's the closest thing you would have to an Aragorn-like figure. And what happened to him at the end of the first book? Or season 1 of the show, which is another frame of reference. What happened to him?
I'm not familiar.
I'm
You
asking my
explain.
audience, actually. I can't assume, but he died. He got his head chopped off. He made stupid decisions, some decisions that just made no sense.
Yeah, even like going back to Lord of the Rings, like if Aragorn became the king at the end, first of all the Gondor aristocracy would reject him because he's like totally an outsider, and just because he has this claim doesn't mean he's like necessarily there. And yeah, the steward was a dick and stuff, but like, and also like, he has no experience. He has experience being a ranger out in the forest and like a hunter and tracker, but like, and a warrior. But when it comes to actually being a ruler, like, what is his frame of reference? Yeah.
You know what I actually would love to see one day, though it never will happen? It had to be a
Hmm.
competent writer. A reimagining of Lord of the Rings in a more realistic way.
Hmm.
That would be an interesting. But then I don't know. It wouldn't be Lord of the Rings anymore. But would that really be a bad thing?
I wonder how much you'd have to change, but yeah, eventually once stuff gets into public domain, like you can do a lot with different series, in my opinion.
Well, I'm not saying. Okay, I'm not saying it would. The original will always exist anyway.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
getting sidetracked here, but if it would be a good way to actually do a critique on the original work while respecting it at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that has potential.
But I think another problem with entertainment is how it distorts reality. When I
Hmm.
started to really take Marxism seriously,
Hmm.
I couldn't watch superheroes without like thinking in my head every single time I watch a movie. Wait, they have all these powers, they have all these abilities. Yet, what the fuck are you actually fighting against?
Yeah,
What are you fighting for?
yeah. They're not using their power to help people. They're using it to beat other people down. And I mean, sometimes that's not always the case. Like I think Spider-Man is a very good superhero in terms of his character and what he actually stands for. But something like Superman, or especially something like Batman, like holy shit.
Well, the problem is like for every Spider-Man you have, because what is he good? He's just one guy. Even if you were to try to change the system, he would
Yeah.
eventually be overpowered by the
Hmm.
government.
Yeah.
He's just one guy, but the Flash, Batman, Superman, they could change the system in any way they want, in any way they in a few hours.
But they try to keep the status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, but they must be responsible for their powers. Okay. You want to know what I think? What I think? I know people have grown sick and tired of the dark and brooding like versions of Superman being in media, but I think Injustice Superman is the most likely Superman we would actually get if he existed in our world.
Hmm. I've only played a couple of the games. I'm not familiar with the rest of the media, but yeah, because basically in that one, like Batman and Superman have kind of fallen from the ideal of what a superhero is, and they turned fascist, like outwardly, like blatantly.
Personally, the Injustice universe would have been a lot more interesting if Wonder Woman was basically not a fucking bad guy, but she actually the was someone that agreed with both of them in some ways, but she rejected both of them out of principle.
Hmm.
And so you got three factions instead of just two. Because it's just something about Batman versus Superman. It's just irks me. Maybe it's because I've grown to hate billionaires a lot with a passion for over the years, but the character of Batman, like a lot of the problems that exist in, let's say, in the Injustice universe, could have easily had been prevented had he simply just fucking talked to Clark Kent instead of
Hmm.
being such a self-righteous prick.
Yeah.
Well, wait, this is going by the comics. Actually, I'm not going by the. because the comics are an extension of the game story, and I just think all this could have been prevented, and he simply just talked to fucking Clark and just basically just instead of basically berating him for what he's doing, he actually supports him and actually tries to talk him out of it just by talking to him.
I think that's part of the superhero mythos thing that's also just in general kind of problematic. Like, so much is focused on the individual and what one man can do or like one woman can do, when in real life that's not how things work. There's always leaders in movements, but it's a movement. There's lots of people. It's not just one person doing everything, one kind of super strong person that leads everyone and people fall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, the thing about Batman, I think the reason why I don't think realistic Batman works without making him fascist, because
Mhm.
the further you put Batman into reality, the more fascist the character becomes.
Mhm.
Which the reason I could enjoy Batman the animated series because it's a fantasy.
Mhm.
It's not realistic. It's not trying to make the character realistic.
Yeah.
But the more realistic you make the character, I'm not saying he doesn't work making him realistic. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. I'm saying Batman is one of those characters that the more realistic you make Batman, the more fascist Batman is because of the
Yeah.
ideology that he represents. Now, I'm not going to call the original version of Batman a fascist because that would mean I had to call Sherlock Holmes a fascist. And
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes inspired the creation of many characters
Mhm.
in the past century. So that just would be pretty ignorant to even say that.
Yeah.
And
Heroes
some
and
versions,
heroes
what?
and heroes and villains, I think too, are inspired by Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah,
Like I
like
think you were talking about earlier, Thrawn, or
the current Thrawn is if we're going the novels, not the show, is basic. It took a lot of emulations from Sherlock Holmes.
and also I think both Kira and Elle from Death Note are inspired by the whole Sherlock Holmes idea.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
as I refuse because that this is stupid to call Sherlock Holmes a fascist. Being a detective, it doesn't make you a fascist. And Batman started off
Mhm.
as a detective.
Mhm.
It's just when you made the character more realistic, when you had actually I'm going by. That's why I'm saying I reject the notion that Batman was a fascist from the very start, because that would mean we'd have to call Sherlock Holmes a fascist because Batman was basically the 21st century Sherlock Holmes when he was first like created.
Yeah.
And there's certain and some versions of the character of Batman actually see Sherlock Holmes as one of his heroes.
Hmm.
So I'm just saying that I'm not saying the character isn't it didn't always have some fascist emolence to the character, but I feel like they weren't as upfront as they were when you started getting people in that that after like the Adam West Batman series was canceled, so they had to find a way to make the character like
Yeah. They had to
interesting for
kind of
readers.
make it a little bit more edgy, but at the same time, I think that was like perfected around like the 90s with stuff like Killing Joke. And then also if you want to go by movies, the oh fuck, what's his name? The Tim Burton movies, which I really like
Yeah.
because they're still very, very fantasy. Killing Joke is much darker, but I think it's much more of an interesting take on all the characters in that. But I think I'm gonna be honest, this might be controversial. I don't like the Nolan movies very much at all. And
Personally,
not just because they're not fun and they feel like too realistic, but I do think there are very fascistic elements in it, especially the last movie with Bane. Like,
oh god, I've not watched that movie in like 12 years.
uh,
No, wait, 12 years, 11 actually. It's more correct because it's 2023. Shit, and but it's ironic because the movie came out in election year.
hmm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting too. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's
Zora makes sense. Yeah.
oh, but here's another thing though about Batman. You want the person that changed how people looked at Batman, and it's the most cited Batman story by writers of Batman in the comics and in the movies and the shows. You
Hmm.
cannot. talk about Batman without talking about Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns,
Hmm.
because that is what actually inspired every Batman movie that's come out since. Like Batman
When
89,
was that? When was that released?
it was released in the 80s.
Okay.
The Killing Joke as well. Those two are the most impactful Batman stories. Because Batman 89 was inspired by The Dark Knight Returns and The Killing Joke.
Hmm. I thought Killing Joke was like 91. I thought that was later.
No, Killing
But
Joke was the
I'm
80s.
mistaken. I'm mistaken. Okay.
Killing Joke was the 80s. It's just you cannot trace any version of Batman that's come since the 80s like without talking about Frank Miller, because Frank Miller did inspire generations of Batman writers to make the character who he is. That's why the Batman character is darker. That's why you could argue that the character actually it's become even more fascistic
Yeah.
after like that comic was released, because it made fascist Batman popular, more popular.
I guess when I think about it, because I didn't really know about the comic timeline compared to the movies, but I didn't know that Dark Knight Returns was released before the movies. But that does make sense, and I think it was like a spiral because like from like now to back then, like it has changed a lot, and that would probably be the first shift, I guess, from old detective Batman to campy '60s Batman to modern, almost fascist Batman. Yeah.
Well, the character of Batman, I don't feel like it became fascist in terms of like pop culture until Batman Begins.
Hmm.
That was actually the first time we actually saw like the fascist Batman in the mainstream. Because cartoons, I don't count really as mainstream when it comes to portrayal of Batman. I really don't. Because not as people watch those cartoons versus the Dark Knight or the Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I don't. I think the Dark Knight is a masterpiece if we're going by from it, filmmaking, like cinematography and acting, and the score. But as the themes of the movie are very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it pushes basically like the corporate state. It basically
Yeah, it does. Corporations working with the government to, yeah. Also, I
yeah
feel like it stigmatizes mental illness and difference too, in a weird way. You
yeah
know what I
like
mean? Like, and yet sometimes you have more nuanced takes on this. Like, I think the Joker movie faults that might have, and the kind of reactionary fan base that it's garnered for the wrong reasons. I think that's a very interesting look into that kind of mental. And I know it's not the same Joker character really, but um, just the way like I don't know those movies treat people who go against the system, kind of stereotypes, anarchism in ways, and
oh
yeah,
yeah, let's not get started on how fucking Disney. I think Disney's probably the most effective, like when it comes to pushing fascist propaganda in their movies.
yeah.
I think Disney has mastered the art of propaganda.
And so many people like know it and grow up with it. So if people like see something in it, they just kind of take it for what it is. They don't actually question it because they're so familiar with that brand that it's like, oh, Disney made it. My kid's gonna watch it, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yes, I don't. I cannot comment on South Park. I haven't watched it that much.
South Park is pretty fucked sometimes. There's parts that are funny. I think South Park is funny when it punches up at people who are in power, but when it kind of like shits on people that are like not in a great position, I think it's pretty tasteless. But
But Family Guy does the same thing. In fact, I think Family Guy is worse.
Family Guy's much more stupid, definitely. Even in South Park, as like stupid and almost reactionary sometimes it can get, there's still like at least an idea behind it that's trying to say something. Family Guy, not really.
I think Family Guy is probably is one cartoon that's pushed Islamophobia more effectively than any of these other cartoons.
Well, especially back like when it was first airing, like that was during the Iraq War, and you look at some of these jokes that were in those, like those are pretty fucking bigoted,
I
and
don't
it's
think I
it's.
can watch Family Guy now. Actually, even the early episodes, which is considered its golden age.
I think those early episodes were some of the most problematic. Like, I don't mean the very early episodes, but like, because like now there's lots of like misogyny and stuff, but like there was like actual like racism that especially that went along with the time, like you were saying, Islamophobia, and making fun of AIDS and stuff, and yeah. And I mean, South Park did stuff where they made fun of AIDS, but it wasn't like making fun of the victims of AIDS, if that makes sense. Like, yeah.
Well, one thing I will say this, since we're talking about perception of reality, like
Mm-hmm.
it was the whole reason why it was so easy to demonize like Arabs, because before 9/11, Arabs were not portrayed in a positive light in any entertainment, whether it's in
Yeah.
comics, television, film.
Yeah.
Like they were portrayed as a bunch of bloodthirsty like monsters.
I think there definitely was a shift though, because like before that, you see them as kind of like, and this is me um, describing how they portray them, not how I'm actually saying it, but like kind of just as like shifty or like mysterious. Like there was very much an Orientalism about it, but I think after 9/11, it became more of not mysterious and kind of greasy, but more like, oh, these people are a threat and they should be stopped, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
And
like
I think
Marvel.
that's going to be coming back soon, because
Oh, it
like
is.
for a while it was like for Mexicans and Chinese were the new kind of other, but now I think with stuff going on in Palestine, you're going to be seeing a lot more Islamophobia, and not just Islamophobia, but um, just anti-Arab, anti-Persian, anti-brown people, basically, which is
I
unfortunate.
know one of the actors for Rogue One wasn't even able to go to a convention because they like they were because of he was they were suspicious of him because
Seriously,
yes.
like what was going to happen? What?
I don't know, because of Islamophobia.
Oh, like he was going to get a bad reaction from people, or they just didn't want him there because it would be a
It,
bad look.
because they thought he was a terrorist.
Oh, yeah, that's fucked.
Like even actors who are just doing a job can get affected by this.
Yeah, especially when you're in the public eye that much.
It's like Marvel, not to mention like when it comes to like I think one trope that I've grown to be really fucking sick of, and I think that this is purposeful. You have characters that have motivations that actually you could actually sympathize with and actually empathize with, even agree with more than the heroes. But then you have them do something completely out of the blue, which is like, what?
Hmm.
I'm just talking
Yeah,
as a way to that's like, oh, these people, they actually don't actually mean what they say. That you cannot trust revolutionaries or those who actually want to change society because they're just another power hungry. Like,
that is a common trope. You're right.
yeah, and not to mention like I like Black Panther, the original, the first film.
Oh God.
I watched that movie more times than I should have. But
Why?
the more I watch it, the worse it gets
Hmm.
because I do not understand how anyone with any shred of honesty could say that Killmonger like was wrong or his father.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can say that they were wrong. Like, how can you see Wakanda as the victims?
And there's another point too. Like, not always is it like this, but often in fiction, it's, oh, these guys are clearly shown as being the good guys, and these are clearly shown as being the bad guys, and it's kind of set up for you. Sometimes it's not, and I think that's refreshing when it is, because those are some of my favorite stories, is where things are more vague or complicated. But in real life, there's not necessarily just clear good guys and clear bad guys. I think, of course, now we can see that yes, there are clear bad guys like Israel, like the United States, but like things are complicated, and people do make unpredictable actions, but like not in the way that media often portrays revolutionary or anti-establishment figures as being unpredictable or dangerous kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's a comfort power fantasy for those who benefit from the status quo, the Marvel
Yeah,
films.
that's true. Actually, never thought about it like that.
Of course, you could argue that Marvel films are basically an American power fantasy because America has nothing else going for it. They can't win wars in the real world, so they have to win war. So they win wars on film. It's like the 1980s. You literally had a fucking like in film after film after film of fucking revenge fantasies against the Vietnamese.
Oh yeah, you've read or listened to that Michael Parenti thing, I'm sure,
Oh yeah,
about Rambo and all the Vietnam movies of the era and stuff. Yeah, yeah,
which rehabilitated like the Vietnam War in
and
the eye.
that's kind of the funny thing too, is because majority of society in like the mid to late 70s in the United States eventually became very tired of the war. Even Republicans and people who were like right wing, they didn't want anything to do with it because they know they'd lost. But there was that kind of romanticism of it in the 80s that kind of brought back like, oh, this was kind of like a lost cause myth. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it's just like they just wanted it. Actually, they just like to. I feel like they didn't want to be reminded of the Vietnam War because it was an embarrassment. Like
Yeah.
Americans in general, if they thought they would go to Vietnam, they would wipe out like the people they saw as the horde, and that would be that. They didn't think the enemies would put up a fight,
Yeah.
but they were proven wrong
Mm-hmm.
because the Vietnamese did put up a fight, and the Vietnamese fought tooth and nail to actually have their freedom.
And they won, and America's probably, you're right, they're probably very embarrassed by that.
And that's why the war basically was demoralizing. Let's be honest here. The Republicans didn't like they supported the Vietnam War, so did the Democrats,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't want to talk about the war or think about it because it just reminded them of America's biggest failure. Because mind you, before the Vietnam War, there was also the Bay of Pigs, which also ended
Oh,
in
yeah.
disaster.
But they were using people they saw as disposable mostly in Bay of Pigs. When it was American soldiers, they started getting worried in Vietnam. And it's not even that, it was like the best, like trained US military personnel who were getting destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you don't see this for the Iraq War or Afghanistan as much either, because that's
Mm-hmm.
war is also an embarrassment.
Well, I think Iraq, they pretty much got what they wanted, but in the end, it didn't turn out like they thought it would, which, if you're anybody else looking from an outsider point of view, of course it didn't. You're just going to destabilize the region more. But they reached their objectives in Iraq. They won that war, but at the same time, it just made things worse, and nobody should be surprised by that.
One in what way though? Did they win long term?
Well, they won their objective of destroying the Saddam Hussein government and
Sure,
putting in a quote unquote democracy. But you're right. Is it a win in the long term? No, because look what's happening now in the region. But
yeah, trillions of dollars wasted.
yeah, and you're only going to see more of that money getting funneled away into Ukraine and Palestine. Well, the U.S. is already billions and billions, trillions in debt, and social programs are being cut to fund more aid and more military of their own too.
Yeah.
People who think and it was also made me call you evil or yeah, you're right. I do think that the first Rambo movie is badass. I love that movie because it's not him like killing like Vietnamese people. It's about he doesn't want to go back to war. He's a veteran who hated it there and thought that the war was unjust, and then the government tries to basically draft him again, but he doesn't want anything to do with it, so he runs away and he kills a bunch of cops because he's resisting. I think that's interesting. And he's not necessarily a good guy. But then you get into them being literal propaganda movies, which are
I think even the first one is propaganda, to be honest with you. I don't think any of them are immune from it.
well, it's propaganda, but it's not as blatant. And I think it is an interesting story, at least in my opinion, the first movie. But
I do know the author of the original novel, like, hates the frickin' Rambo films.
hmm,
The novel is actually different from the movie, actually.
I didn't know that.
Which I'm curious to read the novel to see what it was like, because it's not, because I know the alternate ending, Rambo died.
Hmm.
There was literally an ending where he died.
Was part 3 even a book, or was that just like
I don't know.
like the Afghanistan one?
The Afghanistan one, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of funny when you read like the ending of it.
This is dedicated to the brave fighters and the Mujahideen.
It's like over like 12 years later they went to war with them.
Oh man.
It's like I'm sorry, I think that's funny, unintentionally funny.
Yeah.
Of course, they made another Rambo film. I think the last one, but I've heard that one was extremely racist.
I'm
Like
not surprised. I've never seen it or even heard that much about it. So.
it had to do with something. I think to do with Mexicans, I believe.
Oh.
Not
See again,
surprised.
the kind of other of the time. There's always an other of the time. For a while, it was Mexicans or people from the South America.
Well, Russians were very popular villains back
Oh yeah, 60s and 70s and 50s, big time.
and 80s.
Yeah, 80s too.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous thing in the original Red Dawn where fucking the Cuba invaded the United States.
Cuba and Libya invaded the United.
Like, what the fuck? How's that even possible?
Oh man. Oh,
I think
hilarious.
Kingdom Hearts has not been good in a long time, if I have to be honest with you. It's a convoluted mess. It doesn't make any fucking sense, and you have to fucking play every fucking games, including mobile games, to actually understand the latest installment.
Mm.
And some of them don't even come outside Japan. You even need to read some shit that fucking never officially translated to English. So no.
Yeah, I'm not a Kingdom Hearts. I'm a casual fan of Final Fantasy, but Kingdom Hearts does not appeal to me. I haven't played any of it.
Yeah, it's for the best, probably.
So Monkey says, "Oh, I also remember what you said about a friend saying put in the cyberpunk universe, which is, yeah, I don't know why people would want to live in that either. Yeah, cyberpunk is dystopian. It's not something that people should be wanting to live in. Russians are still, yeah, they are, and especially after
Now they are.
the whole Ukraine war thing, it'll see another resurgence. Because in the 2000s and 90s, I don't think it was because the Soviet Union collapsed and what's his name? Yeltsin was like best buddies with the US. So, but now you will see that return, just like you will see Islamophobia return in media.
Well, I don't think Russophobia ever left, if I have to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, you've lived through this time, and I wasn't around then, so you could say better than I could. But
I don't think it's ever left truly. Like you can't just get rid of like over half a century worth of like anti-Russian propaganda and
no, you're
expect
right.
it to go away.
And you see some of this ridiculous stuff that's being said about Putin, and it's like stuff that was used in the like 1950s, and it's like not even applicable anymore. Like, no, I wish fucking Putin was a communist. He's not. But when people use like hammer sickles in like YouTube thumbnails, it's like Putin's bringing back the USSR. You should be terrified or something. It's like fuck off. Like
If he
I wish he was, but no, he's a bureaucrat. Like basically like Napoleonic dictator. He's not a revolutionary at all. He supports capitalism. it's an inter-imperial struggle, and people don't see that. They only see good guy U.S. versus Russia.
Like Red Dawn, too. The remake was, oh my god, that was just fucking awful. I couldn't finish it because it was so bad. It was just laughable. It's like, wait, huh? What? North Korea invaded the United States? How would they even do that? It's like they're a small country with they don't have the resources to even
No.
mount an invasion.
No. Oh,
It's like the idea was ridiculous.
yeah.
Of course, the movie was extremely racist. Oh my god.
I have not seen it. I want no part in watching anything like that, but
It's one of
I
the most
don't doubt it.
racist movies I've ever seen.
Mm.
It's like, oh god. It's like, fucking god, it was awful.
And this is how we can get into specifically stuff that's not only people looking at fictional worlds and seeing reality through it, but people seeing fictionalized accounts of the real world and thinking that that's what stuff is really like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That North Korea is such a huge threat and stuff like that. Another really fucking racist movie which I did see was The Interview. Oh god.
I never saw it.
Oh god. And if you think about it, if North Korea or China made a movie about killing the US president, they would be freaking out. But when it's on the other foot, when the US makes a movie about killing a world leader, oh, it's funny. And Obama was like, it's
in America.
Yeah. That was more tongue in cheek, but it was still very racist. But yeah. Because it was parodying the idea that America are the world police, but it was very racist and has a lot of untrue things about North Korean stuff. But The Interview especially, it's these are just bad guys that they have, and they go into the whole thing of oh, he's kind of deceptive, so if you think it might be good, it's all just a lie. Very much into the psyop element of gaslighting people and what they actually believe.
Oh god. Jesus, I agree. It's like, oh fuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, can we just what's hilarious? All these chuds get so triggered in any Call of Duty game or Battlefield when you have any sort of option when it comes to pronouns or gender options. It's like, wait, huh? But these games are fascist propaganda. What the fuck?
You'd think that people would actually the audience of them are probably pretty reactionary, so I'm not surprised.
I hate Call of Duty, and I didn't like it even when I was more reactionary because I didn't like first person military shooters in general.
I like playing as the communists in those games, though. In the multiplayer modes, I like that. And the World at War games were pretty good, because they're about World War II, and they weren't necessarily talking about being anti Middle East or anti Russia or anything. But Red Faction is a very good game. I have it on the original Xbox, Submonkey, and yeah, it's about a worker revolution on Mars, and I'm surprised that such a clearly socialist coded game made it out of the development phase. But yeah, that's a very interesting example.
It's probably because back then the military industrial complex was not involved in as much.
Well, yeah, it was 2000s, so yeah.
Call of Duty, we know the military industrial complex is involved in those games. There's no way they're not.
Especially the ones made by there's two studios. There's the one that makes the Black Ops games, and there's the one that makes the Modern Warfare games. And the Modern Warfare games, holy shit, Like some of those are, you can tell that there was some outside involvement from people making the stories and characters like supposed to be like fictionalized accounts of real life, like we were talking about.
Is it, since we're talking about how entertainment distorts reality, can we talk about the obsession with alternate history?
That's a good point. Sure.
It's like, what's up with with this fixation about the Nazis winning World War II? What's up with with this fixation? I want to know what's up with this fixation.
Yeah, and I think in fiction itself, like I really like the Wolfenstein games, especially the New Order ones. I think those are really cool, and there are leftist elements in the game. Like you can play as a guy who's a communist, you can play as a guy who's in the Black Panthers, and they do criticize fascism, and they compare modern America to fascism in the second game. But when you have like these like YouTube videos and like books, it's like, what if Hitler won World War II? Like, oh my god, I think it's just a power fantasy for people who are outwardly or secretly fascist. Like,
Alternate History Hub is probably one of the best examples. And
yeah,
most
that's
popular.
what I was thinking of.
Like, oh, it's like, yeah, what if Hitler won World War II? Like, does a multi-part series? It's like, it's like
You're projecting here, dude. I can see it. Just don't do that much.
You're basically, it's like, oh, nobody has any idea what that world would be like. It's like you're just fucking making up a fantasy.
Literally, just writing a fan fiction about real life Nazis. Like,
it's like there's some ridiculous scenarios that the Earth would be like a 200 or 300 years more advanced than it is today in the modern day. The Nazis was like, no.
Oh god, no, it'd be further behind.
You want to know what the modern world would look like if the Nazis won? I'll tell you what it would look like. I actually think humans would still be here.
Yeah,
because
that's the thing with fascism. It doesn't really exist in a state of peace. Like, it's not a stable element. You know what I mean? It's always having to go to war, having to fuel itself, and we see that as capitalism turns to imperialism, turns to fascism. It always needs war to survive. It'll always be finding an other to blame for its problems until it destroys everything.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think humans as a species we would exist. I think our planet would be lifeless today if the Nazis won World War II. Because we have to also take into account nuclear weapons. If they had them,
yeah,
there's no way they wouldn't use them.
That's the thing, though. All this is such a stretch. Like, there's no way that they actually could have won past 1942 or 43. There's no way. And that's the thing with some of these alternate history things. It's not like scientific analysis most of the time. It's just like, oh, what if this kind of magically happened? And all of these factors that were outside of people's control didn't exist. Like, yeah.
Well, there is a world where the Nazis won World War II. You want to know something? You want to know my secret? You want to know why I say that?
What?
We live it. The ideology of Nazism has never died.
In fact, it's gotten stronger, and it's able to mask itself behind the idea of America and the first world now.
These Nazis have if the Nazis won World War II, they live in it. They live in that world. They live in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, how many fucking Nazis actually paid for their crimes? How many of them actually paid for their crimes? How many of them, like, lived a full life?
Oh, they're getting recognized by Canadian government now. You didn't hear this?
Yeah.
They're being called heroes.
Or you have Nazigate in Ukraine. Not Ukraine, I mean Canada.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. And the US supporting Nazis in Ukraine, and Canada, of course, supporting Nazis in Ukraine.
Israel also supports Nazis.
basically are the modern equivalent of it in their most blatant form these days. Yeah.
It's just this fantasy that these people have about the Nazis win World War II. It's like, ugh. Not to mention, it's just so boring. It's the same fucking scenario over and over again.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do alternate history, which I don't mind alternate history, which if you want to study it, what theoretically could have happened, there's far more interesting things you could do.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a stupid scenario like what if of the Nazis winning World War II if Wilson Churchill died before the World War II
Mm.
and basically make it seem like the British single-handedly saved the world from the Nazis.
Mm.
Like what the fuck? No.
They were close to joining them.
Yeah.
Like,
in fact, Churchill dying probably would have saved millions of lives.
well, that would have saved millions of lives in India in the late 1940s for sure. But yeah.
Like this romanticization behind, since we're talking behind like historical figures like Wilson Churchill, like you have a lot of media that basically romanticizes Churchill
Yeah.
and portrays him as this heroic figure, and he was nothing like that. Basically removing everything about him that actually existed.
He was terrible. He was, yeah.
Depending on
anti-Semitic. He was the most conservative element in the British Empire. Even he was not. He hated India. He was responsible for millions of deaths. He punished anybody when decolonization started after World War II. He punished people in the colonies for standing up against the government, extremely committing genocides in Kenya and other places. Just terrible.
Depending on who
anti-Semitic as well, and very negotiational with certain Nazis earlier on in the war. Yeah.
Depending on who you talk to, who was worse between the two, Hitler or Churchill, you'll get a different answer depending on who you ask.
In what country? Yeah.
Yeah, India will say Churchill.
Yeah.
Europe will say Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that depending on who you ask, you'll get a different answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you got to be very careful, depending on who you talk to, with very region and because there's those in India that see Churchill as worse than Hitler.
And I mean, for their experience, it's valid. What happened to them? Yeah.
He killed almost as many Indians as Hitler killed Jews.
Yeah. Not even just India too, but stuff in Kenya, Ireland,
how many he has Churchill was a monster. Yet in media that he's featured and he's portrayed as a hero. Same thing with Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
She's a monster too. But she was friends of literal Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
You have romanticization with the Romanovs and Russia, despite the fact they were awful. That family was awful.
The most cruel, spoiled, petty people, really. Yeah.
And they expect us to feel sorry. And that's what the thing that entertainment does. They make you feel bad for the oppressor and make you feel nothing but contempt for the victims of the oppressor's violence.
In some media, you mean, not all media, of course, but
yeah. I'm talking about when it comes to the Romanovs,
portrayals of that. Yeah, you're right.
I'm just use them as the example how you do have royalty, especially. I'm more going to elaborate on that. Are portrayed in far more sympathetic light if they're in a bad circumstance or their life is awful compared to someone that's poor that's in the same position.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor people, and speaking of which, don't rarely get any sort of attention in media.
And if it is, it's stereotyped and just harmful and just shitting on the poor, basically.
Or you have J.K. Rowling, who basically who has no fucking idea what poor looks like. I'm sorry, but I refuse to believe that the Weasleys and Harry Potter are poor. I refuse to believe that.
Well, their dad works for the government, so I mean,
It's it's absurd. They're wizards, for God's sake. If you're a wizard, you're not poor. I'm sorry.
you're already part of like an aristocratic family at that point too. Like, it was like, oh,
Show
my
you,
father's father went to Hogwarts as well. Blah blah blah. Like,
this goes to show
yeah.
that J.K. Rowling has no idea what it is to be poor.
It's funny because she was homeless at one point when writing the first book, and then after that, she became like an overnight millionaire.
I have
And
a difficult time believing that it's even true. I have a difficult time believing that.
I have no idea if it's true or not, but that's what it was said. But yeah,
I don't believe it. I really don't. Even if it was true, it
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter now because
the very
she
fact that
lives in a fucking castle.
she has no idea. If I don't think she's ever lived to be. What's the definition of poor for someone that probably never grew, that never actually knew poverty?
And poor in the first world too.
It's like, what the fuck do you mean by being poor? It's like, fuck. Oh yeah, and don't get me started on another thing about entertainment, how it distorts reality. How the Confederacy is usually portrayed in media.
How is that?
You usually have it romanticized. I don't know if it's like that now, but I do recall it was in the early days, like in cinema, like Gone with the Wind, like one of the most famous movies of all time, portrayed the Confederacy like in a more positive light.
See, I don't know as many like actual classic movies. When I thought of that, I only thought of like stupid bullshit. So I mean,
You
I like how
also
you
have
have the intelligent examples, and I was thinking fucking National Treasure, find the Confederate gold or some shit. Like,
wait, what the fuck? That exists?
yeah, that was one of them, I think.
What the fuck?
Oh no, that was a different movie. That was another really reactionary movie I saw called I forget what it was about, but it was like, oh, there was a Confederate ship that actually escaped the war and it made it across the ocean, and now we got to go find their gold. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That sounds stupid.
I know.
It sounds dumb. All the plots.
Yeah.
Of course, Robert E. Lee is romanticized heavily to the point where
that's
it's difficult to find accounts of the real Robert E. Lee versus like the fiction. Oh, he was actually a good man that actually was reluctant, that fought for his state, not for the Confederacy. It's like, what?
Just people trying to cope, really, like, or
I
just
argued with a
lying to
Star
make
Wars fan who had a Han Solo profile picture about Robert E. Lee that he wasn't a good man.
What? Oh god.
That he was a fucking racist, and he was fucking, he fought to keep slavery. It's like, I don't
literally.
You could you could say it all you want, but if you fought for the Confederacy, you fought to preserve the system.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't care what your intention is.
Yeah, that's part of the thing with how entertainment distorts reality too. Is it tends to focus on I said this before, but like individual choices, and oh, this person, he might have fought for the wrong guys, but he was a good person at heart. It's like, no, that's not how stuff works. Like, that's petty bourgeois liberalism. If you fought for an evil cause,
I'm not saying there can't be good people that are unfortunately stuck in that bullshit. I'm not saying
that doesn't. Well, yeah, that's true, but it doesn't mean that like if you fought for it, then you are pretty much like fighting for that cause. You know what I mean?
You should be held accountable.
Yeah.
You should really be held to account, because it's ridiculous. Like, I'm not saying there can't be good people that are unfortunately fighting for fucking awful fucking things, but that's hardly that doesn't really matter to the people that have been victimized. Like, it is a literal choice.
I was gonna say too, like, they might be quote unquote good people, but I feel no sympathy for them, and to me they're just as bad, because everybody has a choice, and that's not saying, oh, choices make everything. No, but if you're actually choosing to fight for it, then you're literally part of the problem.
Yes, exactly. And it's unfortunate that media doesn't criticize that mindset very often.
They do the opposite. Yeah, like you were saying.
I mean, it does do it. It's just, and let's just be honest here. People don't want to watch most people don't want to watch a story of someone who may have been a character they like who fought for the wrong side being criticized for
Yeah,
their complacency most of the time.
it would.
It's just not something that people want to watch or see, especially if they actually like that character more than the character that they had a hand in and like victimizing.
See, and I think that has the potential to be even more interesting, more challenging, but people don't want to watch that. People want to watch a movie that they can sit down for, or read a book that's like 300 pages, or sit down for an hour and a half movie and be done with it. Like, and have a walk away feeling happy and like you're satisfied from it.
Well, if there is
That's
a
just
person
part. That's just part of selling stuff. That's
if the
capitalism,
person
right?
did fight for a bad cause, but they get disillusioned by it and realize this is not what they wanted to fight for, and they basically defect, I
Mm-hmm.
think I have no problem, and I have no problem with those characters being held accountable for their actions. Like, no, you don't get to like act like nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think what makes a better story if a character who is a good person who fought for the wrong side is they're held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
When you're I think that makes a good story, and it's very rare you get those kind of like stories in fiction. Because
Yeah.
to do that, you have to be you have to be a person that's very nuanced in how you write stories and how you like understand like these relations and cause and effect of what of the systems and the consequences of them.
Yeah, and that's not even called into question often in works of fiction. Sometimes it is when you have these more deep worlds, but like stuff is just like taken for what it is, and we don't look at the systems or take a scientific approach. We just see it from the characters.
Yeah. Well, it's much easier to basically just root for somebody because you like that character and not think about the system that they're part of is fucking it sucks.
Yeah.
I only bring this up because it's relevant to history, and when we were talking about like Robert E. Lee, I don't give a fuck what his positions are. He fought to
Yeah,
continue slavery, and
and
he shouldn't be.
he didn't surrender or defect. So he till the end he was a fucking slave apologist, right?
Yeah, and his ideology still has survived up to the present day.
Yeah.
Even though there's people that are objectively worse than Robert E. Lee, but he's a respected general even by fucking people that didn't fight for the Confederacy,
Yeah.
which says a lot because the Confederacy and the Union they weren't that much different in their ideology. It really wasn't.
I would argue that the North was just a modern, more advanced form of capitalism, while the South was a little bit more old agrarian capitalism, and the slave model worked better for that. Whereas wage workers in the North worked better as a more modern system,
What's
more
you know
modern
another
form
thing
of capitalism.
you know what's really good stupid is what if the South won the Civil War? That's like another popular like
Yeah.
what if though it's at least more interesting than the Nazis winning because at least there's a lot of variables you could like how does world history change with this one event? At least there's something, but I not like okay, how does it affect the 1917 revolution in Russia?
I don't think it would.
Well, I'm just hypothetically. How would because how would this affect the post World War II world?
There's a lot more, like the world that could come after would be a lot more expansive and could take a lot more different directions than what if the Nazis won World War II kind of thing.
No, I'm just saying there's a lot of things that it is interesting to analyze if in that aspect. Because let's be honest here, I'm just being real. Even if the Confederacy won the Civil War, they would have had to do away with slavery anyway.
Eventually, yeah.
They would have delayed it by 30 years tops.
Or what might have happened even is in these places where eventually you have so much slavery that the slaves outnumber, you might have just had like a slave revolution at that point in some places, and it might have collapsed. Because the more, if you keep slavery for longer, they know that they were going to get more resistance from people, like what happened in Haiti.
That's also possible, but then again, no alternate history historian wants to come up with a scenario of a Confederate America that's run by black people.
Yeah.
Which might have led to another war because of the North.
Yeah.
Again,
exactly.
That's an interesting thing to discuss because that's stuff that could realistically happen if we're talking about it from a dialectical perspective. But nobody wants to talk about that. Like, how does the
their
world
power
change?
fantasies of what if the fascists won? They want their little power fantasies of what if the fascists won? Like, yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that what if like the Confederacy won the Civil War is a more interesting thing to analyze simply because
it's more possible, I think.
Yes, it's theoretically possible. It could have happened. But it is one little thing that would have that would have changed, and the whole world as we know it would have been different.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I'm thinking is interest. That's what makes it interesting because if that had happened, America would not have been an empire.
I don't know about that.
Not, at least not to the extent that it is now.
I don't know. You mean if like the Confederates like just won the war, they would still be imperialist, of course.
Of course, they'd still be imperialist, but would they be as powerful as they are today?
No, because the North had most of the industrial base at the time, right?
Yeah.
So.
But I'm saying if it somehow stayed, if it actually, just entertain me for a second, if they won the war, and it was two countries, like on the North American continent, well, three because of Canada, like and again, this is what the problem with alternate history is. There's so many variables, stuff that could have happened, that could have changed. Maybe America probably could have still been an empire, but it would have happened later rather than happening like earlier, like in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Like it's possible that I don't know. There's a lot that could have been different. That's the problem with alternate history. It's like a lot of it is like borderlines like fan fiction territory.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know. It's like this. It's the same thing. What if the Roman Empire never collapsed?
That's one of the stupidest ones.
So dumb. It's like, what? Okay. It's like, yeah, the fucking is alternate history have the fucking Roman Empire defeat the Mongols? It's like that would have never happened.
No.
Genghis Khan would have destroyed the Roman Empire if it still existed.
And not to mention all the internal contradictions that the Roman Empire had. Like, it's just not realistic.
Oh, if it outlawed Christianity, the Roman Empire would have collapsed. No.
Some of their most successful time as an empire was when they had it as their state religion. So, Christianity is their state religion. So,
though it actually is a favorite of a lot of secular people, and they actually blame religion for the fall of the Roman Empire.
I don't think that's true at all.
Well, no, it's not. But a lot of people, Friedrich Nietzsche, believed that as well.
Yeah, pure idealism.
Like, he hated Christianity. He truly hated it. Like, it's now Friedrich Nietzsche. I don't recommend anyone to really read him and take him.
No, don't. I had to read a book of his for school, and I hate him so much.
I despise Friedrich Nietzsche, what he believes. I just think it's just bullshit. But he is an interesting philosopher to at least listen to some of his stuff because it's.
Yeah, that's true.
like his. It's like, wait, how does someone like his? His Antichrist thing. It's like, wait, what? Like his romanticization of the Roman and Greek like societies. It's like these societies weren't great.
Yeah. You see a lot of that now from like people on the new right too. Like,
Well, Friedrich Nietzsche, I'd argue, I don't think he himself was a fascist, but he inspired
yeah,
generations of fascists.
yeah.
Because like
He himself was obsessed with, I guess not entertainment at the time, but myth and story and alternate history, like, and it didn't take a scientific analysis of history. It was instead a mythologizing of the past and looking at narratives instead of actual history, right? And that led to not necessarily Nietzsche being fascist. He was very anti-Semitic though, and anti-socialist and misogynistic. But
I do think had he actually lived long enough, I'm talking about to see the Third Reich, he would have been a fascist.
yeah, probably.
There's just no way you could argue that there's aspects of his work that's proto-fascist. It's just a lot of stuff you hear from Nietzsche, fascists, and say like now and at the time
Yep.
that the
Yeah.
fascist movement was rising.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm more familiar with American history than the history of other countries. I do know some German history, though not much. My familiarity with German history is more of like the late 19th century all the way to the Third Reich. That's my familiarity with German history. Yeah, I do think it's I would like to learn more about other history besides America because there's far more stuff that's more interesting to study.
No, I do agree though. American history is taught too much and it's overemphasized compared to world history.
Yeah, it's because it's like
even in Canada.
It's like America treats another thing I guess you could say the way history is portrayed. Like I can't even read a lot of biographies because the way a lot of them are framed, they portray the people in the biography like there's some sort of protagonist of a fucking story. It's like I don't want to read a story when I want to read a fucking history book. I want to know the facts, what these people went through, what were their struggles, what pushed them to do what they did. That's what I want to know. The raw information. I want history, not mythology, history.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not, people don't want to read that sometimes. They want stuff that's a story. They want something that is unrealistic almost.
Yeah, the very fact that American history is the main focus is proof of American hegemony. Yeah, that's true.
That is true.
But the way history is even portrayed, whether it's American history or world history, it's not portrayed in a way that's actually historical. It's I keep saying this out offline, but I'll say it again.
Mm-hmm.
What we're taught about history, and I'm going by, since I live in the United States, I can't comment about it from the perspective of other people who don't live in the United States. So I'll just say it as someone that lives in America.
Mm-hmm.
Is history is portrayed as basically mythology. It's not portrayed as actual history.
Yeah.
And hell, in the United States, I'd argue we're not even taught about our own history very well.
It's selectively, or it's literally changed to.
It's like the most important part of American history, I argue, is not actually the 18th century or even the 19th century. I think the most essential part of American history is not taught, and it's skipped over. I know this because when I was in high school, we didn't really talk about this. I think the era of American history that's skimmed over is the 50s to the 70s. because there's a lot of stuff that we just do that we're not taught about that era, and I had to learn about it myself. Like, okay, what was the geopolitics at that time?
Hmm.
Because we're not really expected to actually learn about history, because they basically want us to freaking only learn about American history, and if we're taught history about another country, it's always from an American perspective.
Yeah. Hmm. That's interesting because in high school, in Canada at least, you have to take like a socials whatever class, and it was mostly Canadian history. And then when it went to another one of the classes you can take was 21st century history, or not 21st, history of the 20th century. And I don't know if they teach that class in high schools in the US now, but or how much has changed to make America look like the good guy, blah blah blah. But I think some of that stuff, the reason they probably don't teach you in school is because it's a little bit too close to home. They know that if they told some of this stuff to kids, it's not the romanticized past that's far away. And oh, even if bad stuff did happen, it's a long time ago. No, this is recent stuff and stuff that's even still going on. So I think it would make kids question more the world around them.
Well, that's why they avoid capitalism being brought up when they talk about like the rise of fascism. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know there was like an attempted coup, a fascist coup on on like Franklin Roosevelt,
Yeah.
until like after I was done with high school. It's like, wait, this is American history. This should be, but this wasn't taught
Mm-hmm.
at high school, and this is actually something big. We almost had a fascist fucking government in America. Not that we didn't always have a fascist government in one way or another, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about what you would think of as fascism from the like as Mussolini like envisioned it. We
Yeah.
almost had that. That's not taught in school. Or about how George W. Bush, oh no, not George W. Bush, George Bush Sr. helped the rise of the Nazis.
I've never heard about this. What is this?
George Bush Sr., he helped the rise of the Nazis.
How? What happened?
He helped finance it,
Oh,
like the rise of the Nazis. Hell, his father helped. Was it one of the founders of the CIA?
I think I knew that, but yeah.
Well, like there's a lot of things we're not taught. Operation
Mm-hmm.
Paperclip. Like there's many stuff that we don't even know about our own history in America, and the way history is taught, we're not taught to actually think about what this historical event is, why it happened. We're basically just told to like not question anything. We're not encouraged to question anything that we read.
Yeah, that's true. You should always be able to look at everything you read.
Yeah, you should
And it
question
should be
everything.
presented to you in a way that encourages that. And it's not just, yeah, making a narrative, making a mythology of history.
Wait,
Yeah.
oh, and you know what's another thing that's really scary though about the way history is taught?
What?
Oh, there's a good amount of the American population that don't even know about the Holocaust.
Really?
Yes,
Hmm.
that's why Holocaust denial is basically has been allowed to spread in this country. It's because in some states it's not required to teach fucking about the Holocaust.
Hmm. On one hand, I'm not surprised, but on the
I'm
other
not
hand,
either.
wow. But yeah.
I'm not either. It's like they're this is the same country that's suppressing like the history of what black people went through. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know there about Black Wall Street either until I was in my fucking late 20s.
I've never heard of that either. What is that?
It's a massacre that happened in the about a century ago,
Mm-hmm.
where it was basically Black Wall Street, where you had an entire neighborhood that was just burned to the ground.
Hmm.
I don't remember. I don't know the exact details. You'd have to. I don't remember it at this moment, but it was fucked. Like
That
it
is
had.
fucked.
It's usually a lynching, like it always was at that time, like I think it was a black man looked at a white woman the wrong way or whatever
Oh
kind of
God,
bullshit, and that's just it was just a lynching, and it was just awful, terrible.
fucked.
It is fucked. I didn't even know about it. Hell, there's people in the black community that don't know about it either because they don't teach that in schools.
Hmm.
Anything that exposes America's dirty laundry is not freaking exposed.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
Well, I mean, you shouldn't be surprised. That's how a state will use their control of history to retain power. But yeah.
Yeah, it's no accident why they don't actually teach about capitalism and its ties to fascism, because if they did, it'd make people question, wait, what?
Yeah. I was told in school by a high school teacher that communism is a lot like fascism and that they're basically the same thing. Like that's the kind of stuff like
Yeah, that's just the way that's just like how it's taught. It's like, wow. Of course, I wasn't taught in that way, but we're not really taught. I wasn't really taught anything. Hell,
yeah.
I wasn't even taught about the Soviet Union in high school.
Well,
Nothing.
when you skip over the 20th century, like yeah.
Like we barely even I didn't even know about this. Okay, I was not taught anything about the Soviet Union. I didn't even know about one of the most destructive battles in history, and that was the Battle of Stalingrad. I didn't
Stalingrad.
even know about that
Hmm.
until after high school. Like Stalingrad, the battle that actually helped like turn the tide of the war.
One of the most historically important battles in my opinion, but
It is.
yeah.
And it could have easily turned out differently. Easily.
Yeah.
And we're not taught that. We weren't taught that in school. Like we weren't taught about the labor movement. We weren't taught about so we barely were taught about the civil rights movement. The only thing when they taught us about the civil rights movement is like, oh, MLK made a speech, and that's it.
Oh man.
That's it. That's all they taught us about the civil rights movement is MLK just said a speech. I have a dream, and it's like, yeah, that's all they gave us. That's all they taught us about MLK.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't teach about the. It's like that's why I say the 50s and the 60s. If you're an American, and 70s, it's essential that we learn about these 3 decades, because it's a lot of like stuff that was going on there. In fact, it's the most revolutionary time in America's history. You actually had a lot of people that were questioning about the soul of America, that was actually questioning capitalism,
Yeah.
where the word capitalism was still being used.
Yeah.
Like a lot of this stuff that's about the modern world that we live in today, it would not exist without these decades. We're not taught this for a reason.
Yeah, you're right. Because then that would make us more not only critical, but just have a better understanding or directly of what's going on now.
Yeah, if you want to understand how Reagan was possible, you have to understand what happened in those decades prior. Like the civil rights movement was like it was over a decade of struggle, and to get minuscule gangs, only for those gangs to be overturned in the Reagan administration.
Yeah. And the history of Black Panthers in the 1960s and 70s and how that was not only probably the closest to revolutionary movement the US has had, but also how they were destroyed by the CIA and the US government.
And COINTELPRO.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the reason they don't teach us the Black Panthers in schools because that would mean they'd have to bring up that their precious President Ronald Reagan enacted gun control. And the Republicans, we can't have that. We can't portray one of our own as pro gun.
Yeah.
We can't have that. We can't have that. Yeah, and speaking, I guess this is related to how entertainment distorts reality. Like it also applies to historical figures. Like Martin Luther King, if the white supremacists had it their way, the only thing anything would be known about him is "I have a dream" speech.
Well, then I would say that the white supremacists did get their way because that's all people know, and he got assassinated by a white supremacist. Like,
Well, more people are aware what he truly stood for, so I don't agree with that.
well, that's
Now,
good.
but still, like, of course, if they had it their way, he would not. They would like you even have places that are banning even the milquetoast version of Martin Luther King.
Really, I'm not surprised. Again,
It's like it's like he's just portrayed as this milquetoast liberal or this milquetoast conservative. Like you have some
oh
side, you have
god,
them trying to claim, oh, Martin Luther King would have been a Republican, or Martin Luther King would have been a liberal. It's like no, Martin Luther King hated both of you.
yeah,
Or you have these crazy people claiming who hated Malcolm X when he was alive. Oh, Malcolm X was a conservative. No, he wasn't. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, it's like, oh, Malcolm X was a violent extremist. Oh, for advocating for self defense. Yeah, whatever. But you just have these simple narratives. Martin Luther King was for peace. Malcolm X was for violence. That's it. You don't.
It's again, it's easy as a like setting up a narrative to have these kind of two sides. Like, it's easy to get people to see it that way because it's a simplified version of actual events and falsified version. Just be like, oh, this guy was for peace, this guy was for violence. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, it's like it's so. There was no truth to that. It's bullshit. There's much more to it than that.
Same with figures like Gandhi, like
I
terrible
don't know anything
person.
about Gandhi, to be honest.
Oh man, um, he was absolutely like terrible. He was a borderline pedophile. I'll just give you the short version. Borderline pedophile. He had like really weird things to say about how Indian people were better than black people, but also worse than the British. And he only wanted to fight for Indian people. He wasn't actually like um, truly anti-racist or anti-colonial. And he wrote letters to Hitler calling him my friend.
Oh God.
And we're taught that Gandhi is this really peaceful guy who used peace to change the country instead of doing it by violence, right?
Of course, that's basically something pushed by the enemy because they don't want any effective because peaceful protest is not an effective form of resistance.
No, it's not.
It's a good tactic, yes, but not but as a form of resistance, like no. Like I think one of the stupidest fucking arguments I've ever heard from Chris Hedges is like a
Oh
militant
god.
nonviolence.
That's fucking stupid. That's one
It's
of
like,
those.
yeah, militant nonviolence. Yeah, something that makes like you can go in your house and not have to pay attention. Nobody pays attention to a nonviolent protest. Nobody. That's
Yeah.
why they advocate for it. But
And
then
the
again, the very idea of a nonviolent protest is stupid because it doesn't exist.
yeah,
Because if you disrupt the system, is that not a form of violence?
it doesn't have to be like physical like violence that's actually being done to people. Of course that is, but like violence is can also be disruption, sabotage. Yeah.
I'm asking a rhetorical question. Is that not a form of violence? It's a rhetorical question because I really do want to know what is nonviolence. What does it actually mean to do nonviolence? Because when I think of nonviolence, I just think of a useless form of resistance. I don't think of it as like a form of resistance that's effective. Because was Martin Luther King really nonviolent? No, what he did disrupted the system. It actually made it more difficult to function. That's hardly nonviolent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, it's a useful tactic, yeah, to basically get people to pay attention. It's like, oh, we're not for violence, so it's useful to basically use nonviolence as a way to gain support. So when the state does do violence against your movement,
You're defenseless.
what?
You're defenseless. Like that's an easy way to say for the system to be like, oh, this is acceptable, and it changes things when in reality it doesn't. So
Well, that's
when
not what I was about to say. Really, is it's useful in a sense that you do it as a tactic, at least in the short term, to basically gain support, but you don't do it in the long term.
well, of course, nothing starts out as a giant fire right away, right? It has to be. You have to start somewhere. So of course, yeah.
That's why I'm saying it's a useful tactic in the short term, but not in the long term.
And to be promoted as like a long term form of struggle, no, it's not effective. Exactly.
Like I had to argue with my sister about non-violent protests, and I said these corporations don't take a non-violent protest seriously. They look at it and laugh
It does nothing. Yeah.
because it literally does nothing. Like if your enemies are telling you you should protest peacefully, then it's not effective. Never in the history would when people fight for liberation do they do it through nonviolence. It's not a fucking novel or a movie where people they won the argument just by being as peaceful as they possibly can.
Yeah. What was have you seen what was that weird like utopian socialist like short film movie thing? Have you
What
seen
was
that?
it? No.
It was called Zeitgeist or something. And it was like the banks were just like, "Oh, we can't do this anymore. We give up." And then like the president's like, "Okay, I guess all the money is free in the world now." And like it's basically just like utopian socialism. Like what if that happened? Like it's so stupid. Like that's not how things work. Like
No.
yeah.
That's not how it would work. That's just like that. No,
It's
that's
just
just bullshit.
yeah.
It's like people that think that like the way Hollywood portrays revolutions, it's just so fucking silly and laughable.
It's either like that or it's a evil bad thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, it's like I don't know if Harry Potter intends to push fascism, but it just seems like the only people that actually challenge the system are the bad guys, and the system itself is fucking awful.
yeah.
But it portray, but I don't know if that's what they're saying. Oh, the system may suck, but the alternative's worse. It isn't just Harry Potter, but Marvel does this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or don't even get started on how Hollywood, when they do historical films on famous historical figures,
Oh God.
like how, like the stuff that they do to like the stuff they remove that didn't happen or exaggerate what happened.
Yeah.
Like I think there was a Fred Hampton movie, I believe. I didn't see it because I didn't want to see that crap.
No. Yeah.
Like it
See,
was about the assassination of Fred Hampton.
I would never watch something like that just because I know
Or
like
or do I mean Huey P. Newton? No, Huey P. Fred Hampton. I'm sorry, Fred Hampton. Never mind. They don't mention anything about socialism with Fred Hampton in that movie, even though that's a big part of his who he was.
how do you talk about the Black Liberation Movement and the Panthers without bringing up socialism? And
I don't know. There might have been a Martin Luther King movie recently. I don't know if there was. If it was, I'm not going to watch it.
mm,
You do have rare exceptions that actually do stuff that's accurate to what happened. Though, of course, like the Malcolm X movie in the 1990s.
I've not seen that. Is it good?
Yes, it's good.
Hmm.
It's really good.
That's, I mean, in the 90s, though, that was a time when it wasn't probably as much sensationalism or control of ideology and media back then. At least in terms of something like telling a Malcolm X story. Because can you imagine if they made that now?
They would never do that now.
It would either be like the most liberal fucking like revisionist thing ever, or he would be bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah. They couldn't do it now.
they wouldn't do it now because they can't because the rising consciousness amongst the black youth.
Hmm.
They know that they would pay that they are more they pay a far more attention to this sort of shit than the dinosaurs that currently run their community.
Yeah.
And I do talk about the black youth because I think they're the people I listen to the most if I were to listen to anyone.
Hmm. In any given community, especially those that have been historically and are currently oppressed, like youth is always where you should go to.
I would,
I,
yeah.
and I don't mean like fucking like kids, but I mean like young people. Yeah.
When I think of young people, I think of people that are in their teens.
I think like 16 to like 30. Yeah. Because like in any like eventually that's one of the problems with any movement is that the leadership over time becomes older and older and older, and you lose the pace with the times when you don't have people in the community or movement that are young and know what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's natural when you like when you get older, you're not going to be as in touch with young people
Hmm.
because it's harder and harder to connect with young people when you're older.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not saying this to criticize people that are my age. I'm just saying it's something that's inevitable. It will get to a point where it will be difficult. It'll be a lot. It'll become difficult for me to communicate with young people because I'm not. I'll be too far removed from their struggle. Even though their struggles, I'm not saying they're not mine aren't valid, but I'm just saying that their struggles are not going to be the same as mine.
Hmm.
That's why listening to young people is important
Hmm.
because they know more about what's going on than we do. Of course, as someone who's in my 30s, I'd argue someone who's 16 would know more about what's going on in the world than I do to a degree. Simple because you know they're they're more heavily affected by the economy and climate change than I am.
And just the access to information that kids have now, like compared to I'm sure when you were a kid and the internet was like barely in its like infancy, but like now they have so many um, youth have so many ways to not only learn more but also uh, do stuff themselves, express themselves in different ways. So I think that's a good thing. But at the same time, people now are more vulnerable than ever to misinformation because there is so much misinformation amongst the information that is available.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to research for any information, it could be a fucking nightmare because there's so much of it that exists.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate reality is, I think, as well is, I think people underestimate. I guess this is a criticism
Hmm.
I would give to the left, the influence that entertainment has on the mind.
Yeah, because I think often it's not neglected, but
I think it
uh,
is.
yeah, neglect. I guess that's a good word, but it's not looked at as much as, I mean, some people have talked about it. Of course, Gramsci talks about stuff like this quite often. Um, but definitely something that needs to be looked into more.
It should be looked into more because you and I, we're just small YouTubers,
Hmm.
and there isn't that much people that actually do look at entertainment from a left wing lens. The one person that did do it, it used to do it, doesn't do it anymore, and that's
Hmm.
Renegade Cut.
Hmm.
When he started focused strictly on politics, um, that to me, it's like, wow, the one person that actually does educate, that talks about entertainment from a political lens, is now gone.
Yeah, because if there isn't that, if there isn't that kind of left wing analysis of entertainment, then it'll just be left to like right wingers or liberals to do stuff like that, and people will not look at stuff that they consume critically with kind of that scientific view and um, a view that's not based on idealism or mythology. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now I understand for those who are watching me who probably don't follow me for for my political stuff and follow me mainly for my entertainment stuff. I understand that you don't want to hear about politics all the time. I don't. It despite what some of my detractors wanted to say, I don't like politics. I fucking hate politics. But the unfortunate reality is we live in a politically charged world. I can't ignore it. I can't put my head in the sand
Hmm.
knowing what I know. It'd be irresponsible.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with taking a break and doing um, something other than politics, but you can't. When reality is as it is, I don't think it can be something that can be ignored.
No, it can't be
Yeah.
ignored. It shouldn't be ignored. And if, yeah, I know, like, things have changed in the past. I'm speaking more for myself, Maxwell, than anyone else here.
Hmm.
Things have changed in the past, like, 10 years. A
Hmm.
lot has changed. A lot for me. I've seen so much in the past 10 years. Like, all the shit that Obama did in the second term, plus freaking
Hmm.
Trump, like the various like massacres that have happened. And let's call them massacres. Let's stop calling them mass shootings at this point. Like with white supremacists, neo Nazis that have it's basically a common occurrence now, and it's becoming more and more of
Another one
occurrence.
just another one just yesterday. Yeah.
It's like sensationalized now. It's like it's another. It's just like, oh, I wonder when the next shooting's gonna happen. That's just what it seems like. Is people are so desensitized.
It's so sick though. Like,
It is.
I hate that.
I do too. I fucking hate it. But it's the unfortunate reality. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't mind digging myself into a book or playing a video game, watching a movie or TV show or writing a fanfic, but I can't but I do have to go outside the real world at some point
Yeah.
because that's the reality of things. Entertainment does distort the reality of how people look at the world and how people live. Like, people
Hmm.
are influenced, whether they want to admit it or not, by entertainment in one degree or another.
Absolutely. And even if you say you're not, like subconsciously, you everybody is a little bit. And so what
And you
you
have
can,
to, if you recognize that fact, that's how you could avoid falling into reactionary cults.
yeah, and being able to look deeper into things that you do consume and say, oh, why is this the way it is? And don't let it distort your reality. Instead, let it form a more whole picture of everything. If that makes sense.
And no, I'm not, okay. You could, I'm not. You could still, for those of Star Wars fans of my audience, you could still read your Star Wars books. For those of other people of other stuff, you could still enjoy what you enjoy. I'm not here to like demean you for that. I'm not like that. It just, you got to be aware of what you're exposed to and recognize it for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let yourself be influenced by too much about what you read or what you watch or what you play, because you will buy into reactionary shit whether you are aware of it or not.
Yeah, because a lot of these things are good at making reactionary stuff seem appealing, and that's the kind of scary part.
Yes, it does.
Yes, Logan Manson Games. That's what I was talking about. Was the one in Maine that just happened
I
this
didn't even
past
know.
West.
I've heard about that not too long ago.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck. It feels like there's a mass shooting like every fucking day now.
Yeah.
Fuck. And I think since we're at the conclusion, I think there's one thing I do strongly disagree with on, and
What is that?
I used to agree with it, but I don't agree with it anymore. I do think the kind of violence stuff that we're exposed to, it does influence, you know, these shootings to one degree or another. When you're exposed to so much fucking violence in everything, like art, film, video games, music.
You're yeah, you're very right. That's also something that as like a teenager I would have been like, "Oh no, that's stupid." But now I think not necessarily all the time because there are other factors and stuff like that. But yeah,
I think it
what
to a
you
degree it's
consume
true.
does if like very very violent things. And it might be controversial to say because I know people say still get up in arms when you say this because oh, I sound like a fucking dad or something for saying it. But it is true. Like if you watch, and it's not like all violent stuff, but I mean, and excessively of the amount of violence that we are exposed to on a daily basis and how it's normalized has a lasting impact on us socially. Yeah.
Of course, people are probably going to throw the argument, but what about Japan? Japan has more violent entertainment than we do to a degree. No, that's not true. In
I
fact,
I I was in Japan and I don't think that's true. Like yes, some stuff in Japan they don't a lot of media that can be violent is more violent or is there's more acceptable levels of it, but as a cultural thing, of course Japan is still very fucked up culturally considering its place in history, but compared to the West and the US, not even close.
well, not to mention Japan has laws against that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, like the psychological effects of seeing so much violence for so it like for so fucking for like from infancy up until like adulthood. Of course, to take other things into consideration, capitalist alienation is also a factor. Like
Yes.
alienation combined with violence, and you just
That's what I was gonna say because that's the other big factor. It's one is the active factor, the other is the irritative factor. Like the base factor is alienation. If you're not alienated, then you probably won't be having these feelings like, oh, I want to go kill a bunch of random strangers to a very severe degree. But it's that plus the kind of social forces that we are exposed to other than alienation, such as media, such as politics that'll influence people in that way.
that is true, and it's also take into consideration the kind of spaces that exist, such as like there's places that actually don't fucking they allow people to fucking post and say violent things, or they're encouraged actively to do it.
What Twitter is becoming now. Again, I'm not on Twitter, but yeah,
I was about to say 4chan and 8chan. Where the fuck you call these sites?
those are the old school examples. But yeah,
They still
that are just
apply. They still exist.
these just basically just hate garbage sites that are people can be as evil as they want because everything's quote unquote anonymous. when in reality it isn't. You should know that if you're on the internet. But yeah. Anyways, is there anything else you want to say? To wrap
No,
this
I
up?
think
I think we made some very good points.
I think our points I think we both made were pretty solid. I don't really have much to add because I feel like if we continue on with this stream, we're just going to be repeating ourselves.
Yeah, that's true. And we're almost exactly at 2 hours now. So thank you for having me on. Thank you everybody for watching. And we
Yeah.
will see you next time.
Yep. And as always, may the force be with you and stay safe and see you later.
Force be with you always. Red salute.
Red salute.